All right, well, welcome to the Robo Show. I'm Chad Robichaux, and I'm here today with two guests that are, we've been trying to get them on forever, and super excited to have them on and talk about their military history, their books, particularly their new book, and then just writing in general. I think writing is something that a lot of people are interested in the process of it, and particularly I think veterans want to, they want to share their story. There's so many lessons that can be learned from these two guys. So Brian Andrews and Jeffrey Wilson, both U.S. Navy veterans. I'll let them talk a little bit more about their military careers. But they together combined, they did 21 books. I think if I got that right, and 15 of them together. So they're definitely a team. They just did this new book called Dark Intercept with Tyndale. Tyndale's, an incredible publisher. They put out some amazing books. Both these guys are Wall Street Journal best-selling authors. And I actually usually I like to read a book all the way through before I do an interview on it. But I confess I haven't read it all the way through because my life's been so crazy. But I'm like itching to turning the. It's a page turner. I'm super excited about it and finishing it. And it's just a really good book. And so how you guys doing today?
Doing great, Chad. Good to see you again, man. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you can just tell the listeners a little bit about yourselves and your military career and what got you into writing.
Sure. So I guess I'll start it off. Brian and I have known each other for a good while now. It seems like just a couple of years, but we've been doing this together for 6 years now. But we did not meet in the military, so our paths didn't really cross until we were already both writing individually. So I'll tell you my story. My military career is as schizophrenic as the rest of my personal history. I started out in the Navy going to be a fighter pilot. It was mid to late 80s, and I was going to go fly fighters like my dad had done. Got into the training pipeline, was in a motorcycle accident, and got out again. They had the opportunity to stay, but they weren't going to let me fly jets, and I was ready to fly jets. So I went and flew civilian airplanes for a little while, and didn't find that very satisfying. So I wound up in another area of the federal government doing some other work, trying to find purpose. And it was a violent life, as I know you can relate to. And so eventually, when it wasn't quite like I thought it was going to be from all the movies and TV shows, I decided to pursue a career in medicine, find a life of peace. So I went to medical school, joined the Naval Reserves, and during that time was planning on just being an academic doctor and was going to write papers and cure diseases and do all kinds of cool stuff while still serving as a reservist. And then while I was finishing up my training, a bunch of insane people crashed those planes into the towers in the Pentagon and the field in Pennsylvania, and it changed the entire trajectory of my life like it did for, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of us. So I went back into the Navy. I transitioned back to active duty and did a deployment with the Marines. Gotta love the Marines, and was a FRIS team surgeon with them. And when I was downrange, I ran into some folks from my weird, spooky past, and they introduced me to some other weird people, and I wound up being a combat surgeon and developing a austere environment platform for a East Coast based SEAL team, and did the rest of my career and deployments with them. So all over the place militarily. And then after the Navy, I stayed with a joint task force for a period of time, and now I write books full time. So that's me. That's my story.
We'll shift it over to you now.
Yeah. So I guess similar to Jeff, you make these plans in your life. You think you know where you're going to go, right? And then stuff always intervenes and sends you on a different direction. But I mean, that's sort of the fun stuff. So I was an ROTC guy at Vanderbilt, and I was a psychology major. I was very interested in the brain and how people think and why we think the way that we do. And I had always sort of planned that I would go into naval intelligence, and that's what I wanted to do. And then some policy changes happened and certain doors closed. And then lo and behold, I was like, I guess I got to figure something else out to do. So I did a big pivot, and was one of the only psychology dudes who maybe audaciously or sort of misguidedly, I don't know, applied for the submarine community. But, I went up there with all the engineers and other science nerds, and somehow made it through the screening process, and was a submarine officer on a fast attack submarine in the Pacific for a tour. Did some really, really, really cool stuff. Not as cool as or as dangerous as what you guys used to do, but still pretty fascinating to be on this giant machine that's sort of almost like the USS Enterprise, like underwater. And then after that, I went to business school and sort of pursued a leadership path and got my MBA and went into business, but always in the background, there was this desire to storytell. I love telling stories. I love talking to people, exploring new ideas, and that writing bug just sort of germinated and eventually took off. And I met Jeff at a thriller writers conference, two Navy guys. We sort of, found each other in the crowd, and it became fast friends and started collaborating after that. So here I am.
I gotta say, I got pauses. I've always been just fascinated with people that who spend their time deployment in a submarine. We have a guy on our staff, Luis Rivera, who's a SEAL, and before he was a SEAL, he retired as a SEAL. Before he was a SEAL, he was in submarines, and to be underneath the water in that isolated environment for months at a time is just, what's the longest you spent underwater?
So, the normal fast attack sort of deployment schedule is you do these typically two missions back to back. So it's a 6-month deployment, but usually there's 2 back to back. And so those are like, 75 to 80 days. But we had a really successful mission. I can't talk about it, but we were doing some really, really cool stuff. So they kept extending us on station. So we ended up being on station for like 102 days. So that was my record, continuously submerged 102 days.
Do people start getting stir crazy, or is the environment?
Yeah, and they get grumpy because you eat down all the good food, right? So there's nothing left to eat. And that food, the coffees, they say a supply officer can get fired for 2 things. One is being corrupt, and 2 is not buying enough coffee. So if you run out of coffee, you're fired. But also, just because there's only so much room on the submarine to store food, the freezer is actually pretty small. So we would store, if you're in a mission that goes up north where the engine room's getting cold because the surrounding water temperature is really cold, you can store food in the outboard actually because it's cool. It's cold enough. But once the eggs are gone and all the vegetables and meat and everything's gone, it gets pretty rough.
I'm trying to imagine what the smell was like after 102 days. When you cracked that hatch, you could probably almost see the cloud come out of that boat. Oh my God.
Good thing
I have a story about
that. Is there anything on the ship that helps people could go so you're compared to the Starship Enterprise in space, right?
Yeah.
You see a lot of these movies now in space, they'll go in these rooms that have can make them look like they're outside and they're watching horses running a pasture or something like that to help them mentally.
Oh yeah.
No, they rip like that is your rack, and it's really small.
The Navy
close a little curtain, and that's it. That's your virtual reality right there.
What about outside communications with the,
Yeah, now that's the weird thing. I think probably, when I was in, it was a while ago. So I think they probably have more regular comms and stuff. But with a submarine, at least the fast attack platform, it's a stealth platform. So you are not transmitting. I mean, you can receive information, but you are not transmitting because that will give away your position. So, you sort of sign this. I remember it very distinctly. When you come on board, they give you this form. And the gist of it is basically, do I want to be informed if something very bad happens to a family member or not? So let's say your wife and kids get in a car accident and they're in the hospital. Do you want to know that, knowing that maybe for the next 2 months you can't do anything about it?
You're not.
Or is ignorance bliss? So Chad, what would you pick? Would you pick tell me or don't tell me?
Yeah, I think if I was going to opt to go in that situation, I think ignorance is bliss.
Jeff, what would you pick?
I mean,
that's a hard one. I think that if you really knew that there was no work in the system and getting off station, I think it'd be easier to not know.
It's not going to come
up.
I
picked ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, and it's not going to come up because of you, and there's nothing you can do if you can't communicate out. You can't be of any help.
Yeah.
No.
I think just making the right decisions and putting the right protocols in place in advance.
That's what you do. And all of us, know what it means to have a powerful, strong spouse, someone in your life who you can trust completely and leave that when you're gone, that person's in charge and you trust them. And that's an important part of a military service. If you're married, is that you have a spouse that you can count on and, can handle that stress.
Yeah. I wasn't in the same situation as that, but when I was in Afghanistan, because of the way I was deployed, I work with local national. I'm out in the mountains by myself for days. I had a Iridium satellite phone that I could make a phone call if I needed to emergency, but I was not in constant communication with my spouse and my wife, Kathy was just, she kind of knew in advance, like only notify for, super emergency. Like if the washer broke, I wasn't going to hear about it. Right.
Yeah.
I didn't have to hear about those things because I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't just get home. And that was one of the things that's always on my mind. What if my kid gets hit by a car or something like that? Something like that. Like I can't be there the next day, even it's going to take me days to get home. So that's something that, we talked about and dealt with on a different scale as being trapped in a submarine for 100 days.
That's the one. I will say there's actually good and bad to both though. We were, I was with the unit that I was with was, on the JSOC side. So we had pretty robust communications. It was very strange. Wendy could actually call me and it would be a local Virginia number. And so the downside of that is you talk every day, sometimes twice a day for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then you're out of pocket for a few days.
Yeah.
They go insane. Like in some ways it's way better if she just doesn't expect any communication and it's icing on the cake on the rare call, but she would get into this routine of, oh yeah, you should have called by now. It's 15 minutes late, and she would go drive herself crazy. So there's a downside to both. That's for sure.
My wife, she wrote these letters and she would write my first deployment. She wrote one almost every day. And, she just did it she wanted me to have something that I could open, like when I'd be, when the mail would come in, she'd know that, okay, I could open these. She'd know I would know she was thinking of me. So when the mail came on the first deployment and then they're bringing out the mail, like, here's a letter for Brian. And people are like, oh, you got one, And then more and then more and more. The letters started piling up. Eventually everyone's like, man, I don't like you very much. Like, it's just terrible.
Yeah. Well, let's I can talk about that all day. Let's shift to the book. Talk what Dark Concepts, Dark Intercepts about. Why'd you guys write it? What's different about this book from the books you guys have previously written? I think is what I really want.
Yeah, for sure. So this is something that we actually had in the works in our minds, at least, and for what that's worth. For the last several years, we had been toying around with this idea. The question was, the first question for us was, how can we take what we've done so successfully in the thriller market with, writing books that are designed to be gritty and realistic and have guys who've been operators like you read it and say, yeah, that's how it would happen, right? How can we take that and combine it with our faith and the issues that we have struggled with and that we work with men in, such as crisis and faith and what that looks like. And then it even broadened into the idea of, spiritual warfare. Would it be possible to combine those, but to do it in an entertaining way? And so what we came up with was this concept. And the idea of this series is, I guess the question is, if there's these horrible, evil things that happen and you believe that there's an evil beyond just the dark side of man, that there are evil forces in the world that drive things, if that's true, if Hitler and Osama bin Laden and Mao, there was something more evil and insidious than just their human nature, would there not be a faith-based element that would stand up to combat that, almost a special operations type unit that would combat the evil in the world in real time? And so that was what we came up with as a concept that excited us. And initially it was going to be just that. And then we sort of ended up blending in some of the spiritual warfare elements as well. But we were super excited about it. But unfortunately, at the time that we developed it, or fortunately for us, I guess, in our career, we already had these other books. We'd already sold Sons of Valor, the spinoff series, to Tier 1. Then we got this deal with Putnam to do the Webb Griffin series, Presidential Agent on behalf of the estate. And so we just had this sitting in a drawer figuring, one day. And it was one of those kind of God moments where we get this phone call from a buddy of ours, Josh Hood, who's also got a very strong faith, also a thriller writer and veteran. And he says, "Hey guys, I was on this airplane, I met this girl and she's looking for some Christian thing for Thriller Tyndale House or something, I don't know. And can I connect you?" And I was like, "Yeah." We know Josh a long time. We're like, we're never getting a phone call from this person. But literally 3 days later, we're sitting with Jan Stobe and Karen Watson, our editor, and they really wanted to start to grow action adventure, realistic thriller type stuff in the faith market. And next thing we know, we had a book deal and one more series to write. So
yeah, it's great. I mean, I can tell you that, I love action adventure books, but then I'm always trying to invest in, I only have so much bandwidth to read so many things. And I'm always trying to invest in my spiritual growth. And so to tie those two together is like a win-win for me. I've stopped reading a lot of the kind of action adventure stuff I used to like to read. I confess I love Dan Brown's books.
Yeah.
All those books, and but I haven't read a lot of that kind of stuff anymore because I've been just investing in my spiritual growth. And so this is a good solution for me.
Well, that was sort of the ministerial side of it, right? I mean, this is fiction. It's fun. It's meant to be entertaining. But if you can have a book where you can go on an exciting thrill ride for a thriller reader, and at the end have things you want to think about, if it can stimulate conversation, if it can stimulate some questions and answers for people, wow, that's even, how often you get to do that in our job. So that was a big draw of this for us.
So one of the things I want to talk about is the art of writing books. You guys have done a lot of them, 21 of them. As so many veterans, want to share their story. They've, in the last 20 years, is kind of unique because we've the longest time at war. So many veterans have been to combat. They have their stories, their personal stories, their stories of hardships, their stories of triumph. They want to share their stories. And I've written a few books myself, and it's not easy. I never thought I'd read a book in my life, going into the Marine Corps, much less write one. And now I've written several. And what would you guys' advice be to somebody that wants to write a book, that wants to share their story, self-publishing versus publishing, all those obstacles that are in the way? What would advice be to someone that wants to, venture into that?
I mean, we talk a lot about, first and foremost, writers write. And it's a simple phrase, but it means you need to get the words, get your story out on the page first. And I think this paralysis hits a lot of people where they think, well, I've never written a book. I've never told my story. I am not a professional storyteller. I don't even know where to start. That's okay. Just start. You have to start. So start getting your story out. And once you have something on the page, now you have something to work with, right? So it's all nebulous up here. You kind of think you know what you want to say, but it's not until you start getting the points on the page, you start remembering the story. You need to have clay to mold before you can make a sculpture, right? So get that clay, start working it, start getting a shape. And then I think you can start to seek out, beta readers. That's a very safe, easy place to start. Have a trusted friend or a colleague or a parent or a brother or spouse read your work. And they need to be somebody that you trust and have a good enough relationship with that you can accept critical feedback from them. They need to be able to feel like they can tell you their honest opinion without hurting your feelings or fracturing your ego and making you get all mad and walk away. So prepare yourself for that feedback. And then I think once you've at least taken those first two steps, Jeff, what would you say the next step is after that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. A writer writes, and you can't finish something you never start. I think sort of expanding a little bit on that, the paralysis of starting is a big thing. And then there's this feeling that each sentence and each paragraph and each chapter has to be perfect. We work with a lot of writers. We mentor a lot of writers these days. And one of the things we tell them is don't do that. Most writing occurs in rewrite, to be honest with you. And this, Chad, having done some books now. your rough draft is not for anybody except your editor and your beta people to see. So just get the whole story out. Don't worry if you know that paragraph wasn't your best or this chapter is going to need some work. Go all the way to the end, and then you can start to put that craft in to make it perfect, to make it resonate. But this idea that people that haven't written think they can't write, if you read, you can write. I mean, there are certainly people that are more talented at all things than others, but if you have a real story to tell, you'll be able to get it on the page, and an editor can help you get it clean and perfect to where people can enjoy it. And so the idea of not doing it because you feel you're not a professional writer, I wasn't a professional writer until I was. And so most people in our space, in the thriller space, do not have education in creative writing. The vast majority of the people that we know and are friends with have no formal training in writing. They just have life experience and stories they want to tell. So I agree with everything you said, Brian.
I kind of have the opinion, like, if you could think, you could write. Because all I do when I write is I just think out loud, and I don't try to structure it. I don't try to, when I'm originally starting something, I just start spewing my brain through the keyboard, just like spew it out, get it out there, and organize it later, or chop. And I mean, I just like spew my thoughts. I keep a notepad on my phone, and when I have a thought throughout the day, I write that down, because you think you might remember that, but you won't. If you're laying in bed in the middle of the night and a thought comes up, I just put things that will jar my memory and write those things down. So I keep kind of a running log of thoughts, and then I'll go back, and when I have time to write, then I'll take that thought that I had in my notepad, and I'll just let my brain just spew that. And I just start collecting it that way, and then structure all later. And you may use, for me, like I may use like only 20% of that stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's I mean, right now the book I'm working on, it's going to be a 50,000 word book, and I probably have about 35,000 words already that are just like that thought, that just spewing my thoughts out. I'll probably realistically only use half of those words.
Right.
But it's a place for us to pull from. One of the things I want to ask you guys about, because this is something that concerns me, that anytime there's an urge opportunity for somebody to do something, there's going to be people that try to take advantage of them. And so many veterans, I hear that people are like, oh, I wrote my book and it's getting published. And then I ask them a few questions, and I just realized that they just got scammed because they paid some company to publish their book. And so, as someone who cares about the veteran community, I know you guys do too, is there any kind of words of warning you have for those kind of, pay to publish people? Like, getting really published is hard. It took me, I think 7 years of working on books before I finally get legitimately published. And I'm sure you guys had a long journey for that too. And there's so many scam artists out there that are taking advantage of veterans and other people that are aspiring to be writers and having them pay to so-called publish something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big red flag. If you have someone who's calling themselves a publisher and saying you have to pay them to do it, that's a red flag, especially today, because you can independently publish through, Amazon and their Kindle platform, through a variety of different places. And yeah, you're going to invest some money, but you're not paying somebody for the privilege of having done that. So I think that, whether you go the independent publishing route, whether you go a traditional publishing route, as Brian and I have, I think that depends on what your goals and your motives are. And, what are you looking to share this book with as part of your speaking business? Or are you trying to do it, for family and friends, or you want to make it a career? Those are things you have to ask. And so I think independent publishing, traditional publishing are both legitimate. But if you've got some place that is saying, hey, if you give us a few $1,000s, we'll publish your book and you'll get royalties, red flag. I can't think of an exception to that.
That's the easiest way to put it. Yeah. If you have to write a check to somebody, and you're right. You don't have to with Amazon, or you could do Amazon like print to order. So you could write a manuscript, get your manuscript together, get it edited, and upload it to Amazon. And you don't even, Amazon will literally print the book as someone orders it. So you don't even have to invest a bunch of money in. And that's just a good way to self-publish. And then you do that, you get successful there, move some books. And then, if you're very successful there, maybe do it again and build that platform and that demand. And then you can work towards, trying to get a publisher that's not, you're not going to have to pay, they're going to pay you.
So I just want to key on one important word that you said, Chad, which is platform. And this sort of relates back to what Jeff said too, which is, when you're starting out, you have to think about, what am I trying to accomplish? What is my objective? Do I want to become an author? Is this a career? Or am I writing this for myself because it's cathartic and I need to get my story out there? Very different objectives. And so in today's marketplace, thanks to Kindle Direct Press, KDP, anybody can self-publish. The tools are all there and it's nice and slick and easy to do and it's wonderful. At the same time, there's millions and millions of titles now out there. So for people to find your book, to cut through the noise, to be discovered, you really need that platform. And what is your platform and how are people going to hear about you? So if it's going to become a business, that question about platform, which is who am I? What do I represent? What's my message and how am I going to communicate that outside of just, the words on the page? What do I stand for and how will people find me? Those are very, very important questions you need to ask yourself and have answers for before you start.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. In the process of writing, writing's like a kind of methodical process as you get closer towards the end. How are you guys? I'm just really curious on a personal level, because you guys did so many together. Do you guys have a methodology, a system that you do it together?
Yes, Jeff picks the nouns.
Right. You guys are talking over each other. I wonder how you write with each other.
My method is I tell Brian what to do and it's a question we get a lot because there's only a handful of successful co-author teams out there in the market. And what's interesting is we've been on panels with most of them at this point, at various writing conferences. And every one of us, every partnership does it completely differently. And that's as it should be because their partnerships are different. And so the first step for us is, we had to determine, like the things Brian is saying, who are we? What are we trying to do? What do we want to accomplish? We want to make sure we're on the same business, page in terms of what we wanted to do. But from the creative standpoint, which I think is what you're asking about, our system is going to sound a little crazy and it's not very structured and methodical or even very mature. It actually looks a lot like your 8-year-old in the backyard with his buddy playing Army. It's a lot of brainstorming. We don't live in the same town, so we're 1,000 miles apart. We're on the phone constantly. And it's like, dude, what about this? Oh no, I have a better idea. What if we did this, this, and this? So that's the fun part, is sort of mapping the story out. But when it comes to the actual writing, the process is pretty simple. We divide the book into thirds. We divvy up the chapters in the first third. We write multiple point of view. So we'll split it up by point of view in each section. And Brian is writing chapter 1, 2, 5, 9, 11. I'm writing the other chapters, and we write simultaneously, but we communicate constantly. And so we're on the phone 3 or 4 times a day on an average work day. And then every few chapters, we swap them. I rewrite his, he rewrites mine, and they go into a master file. And when we tell other writers that, they're like, well, that's insane. That could never work. And they're probably right, but somehow it works for us.
How do you manage the voice and style? You guys have to have, different writers' voices and different style.
That's our secret sauce. Yeah. So this is something that happened again at the very beginning. And I give Jeff credit for this really, really important construct, which is he said, if our goal is to tell a good story and to sell books, we really need to take our ego out of the equation. And it's not about, okay, I wrote this sentence and you wrote that one. It needs to be about, the finished product, that together we write the best possible book that we can. So we said, okay, it's very natural as a writer. Your first inclination is you want to guard your prose and think you wrote something perfect and it's great and nobody should touch it. And we said, we'll never get anywhere that way. We have to carry this, sort of like that SEAL team carrying the boat on your head. We have to carry this boat together. The load is too much. So we gave each other permission to edit anything. And he can change anything of mine and I can change anything of his. And that takes a lot of trust. But it also means that by the time the book is done, we've had our typewriter all over the book, everywhere we need to go, our cursor, our mouse, we're deleting, we're adding whatever. And you get an Andrews and Wilson voice instead of a Jeff voice or a Brian voice in the finished product.
Yeah. And it's that rewriting is important.
when each of you read it, can you pick out like, I wrote that, he wrote that?
So that's really,
or has the voice totally merged?
it's really funny that you asked that, because initially I think we probably could. We're at the point now where I'll be reading it and I'll be, oh man, I'm a genius when I wrote that. I think maybe, no, I don't know who wrote that. We literally, my wife will come to me and say, oh, I know that chapter 5, that was you. I'm like, I'm not making it up. I really, really don't know. It gets to the point where it goes back and forth so much. But I'll tell you, you'll appreciate this, Chad. The reason we're able to do that and some of these other writer partnerships find it so impossible is because we're both military.
Yeah.
Because the idea of mission before self, team before self is something that just gets, imprinted on your DNA when you serve. It becomes a part of who you are. And so for us, that idea of putting ego aside to accomplish a mission or to, make the team succeed rather than to succeed individually was very, very natural for us and not a big struggle to perfect.
Yeah, that was just super interesting to me because I did Jeremy Stolnaker and I did Path to Resiliency together. We did Truth About PTSD and we did a suicide book that's not out yet, that we did those 3 together, which are small reads. They're like, an hour long reads. But I intentionally, I felt he was a stronger writer, better communicator. I took the back seat, let him take the lead. I kind of worked for him in that process. Now that I'm doing some bigger books, and I've had I have another one coming out in February with Thomas Nelson called Fight for Us, which is a marriage book. I did it with Adam Davis, and he's the with author. It worked out good because it's my book. I'm in charge. All respect to him, and he's an incredible writer. But he was essentially working for me. And so I was kind of controlling that. And then my next book I have another with author that we were talking about earlier. I don't want to say who and what book yet, but the same thing. I feel like I'm in charge. So it's really interested in that. And I'm glad to hear you guys answer to that because it gives me a little hope.
Yeah, it sounds like you've had a similar experience. When you trust that other person, you can get a lot more done too, right? Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, kind of wrap up here. How can people get the book? What are some other books that they might be interested in? Just kind of point the listeners to, how to find you guys and how to start reading your stuff.
Yeah, the easy thing is to just go to our website, andrews-wilson.com, and it has everything, all of our books, links. You can buy our books wherever you buy your books, they're there. You can find them. But to keep up with the multiple series, that's the easiest thing to do. We actually have a newsletter they can sign up for and get notified and get special giveaways and stuff. But this book that just came out they're gonna come out pretty quick. So the Shepherd series is we're super excited about it. Dark Intercept is out now. Dark Angel, which comes out in April, is going to come very closely on the heels of it. And the third book in the series, Dark Fall, will also be out before a full year is even up. So we got this first trilogy, and God bless Tyndale House for investing in us like that. It was a lot of work for us, but a lot of work for them to get all of these schedules coordinated and covers and edits and stuff, but they really believed in it. So that's that series. We also we're known for our Tier 1 series. I'm going to just go ahead and say this now because we're getting a lot of mail. Yes, the Tier 1 series is still up and alive. We have an announcement coming literally in the next week or so about the official release date for book 7 in the Tier 1 series. It'll be out about a year from now. Super excited about that. Sons of Valor book 2 comes out next summer. And then Brian, you want to tell them about what's going on with Putnam?
Yeah, so then the last thing is we're very excited. We were asked to take over, sort of carry the mantle for the Webb Griffin estate on the iconic Presidential Agent series. So the first book that we've written, but it's number 9 in the series, called Rogue Asset, that comes out December 7th in just a few weeks. So we're really, really excited and looking forward to that. And then let me just do a quick shout out to Ray McPadden. We March at Midnight is a fantastic book. It's also about Afghanistan, and I think it'd be something interesting. If you haven't read any of Ray's work, your listeners would probably find this one quite powerful.
Awesome. Well, yeah, if you want to support veteran authors, these 2 guys are, amazing. Like I said, I'm excited to finish the book. Thank you guys for playing on, and look forward to the next one's coming out. So, and I'm going to be picking your brain some more off the show for some mentorship and advice.
Anytime, man. Anytime. Yeah. We sure appreciate talking to you today.
And I just want to say, thanks for doing what you do. Every day you're out there trying to make the world a better place and not just living with the status quo. And Jeff and I talked a lot about what a difference you make. And so thank you.
I appreciate that. Some things right now that, just have to be done and it's the right thing to do and we have to do them. So I'm thankful for the opportunity to.
Hey, Chad, I'll tell you, I've actually sent 2 different people to Mighty Oaks who did events with you that did, the last one was over a year ago, but one was from Tampa and another guy, they have nothing but good things to say. All I know is what I see peripherally and talking to you, but man, you've got a heck of a thing going with Mighty Oaks. It's filling a necessary void, or a void that needs to be filled. So thank God for that and all the hard work all of your people do on that.
We do have an amazing team. I'm so thankful for them. So appreciate you trusting your friends with us and sending them to us. So
yeah. Thanks for taking good care of them.
God bless, guys. And we'll catch you next week.
Thanks, Chad.